Welcome to Vinyl Community Vinyl Tag number Vinyl Tag 2019. Here it is, first video of the year, and it's Vinyl Tag. Yes, you're going to learn more about my collection. These questions were put together and sent.
I've got to do a vinyl tag video.
Hundreds of people.
Let's do it, Charlie Watts.
Feel free.
Let's go make a video. Hello, Vinyl Community. It's Tommy in North Carolina, and I'm glad that you're watching. As Steve Carlson said, it is Vinyl Tag 2019 time, and I like to play vinyl tag, so here I am for my vinyl tag. So the 20 questions, and I'll post them down below. I'm not sure where all they generated from, but that was a blurry moment. I apologize. But, however, I'm going to share with you my Vinyl Tag 2019 video choices. So let's get started without further ado. Best find of 2018. So I'm assuming best album that I could have found in 2018 was best find of 2018. I might say this. I picked this up at a local record store. Judy Seal's Heart Food. There's so many stories about Judy and just the stories and the status, but it's a really, really fantastic album. She's such an interesting voice, and when I say voice, not only her singing voice but her songwriting, just everything about this album is really, really wonderful. And this isn't in the best shape. The jacket's not. The record is beautiful. It plays very well. In fantastic shape as far as the LP is concerned. And I always tell people you don't play the covers, so it's okay that it's a little smashy maybe, but because the vinyl sounds great. But this is probably my best find of the past year. Shout out to other VC channels who deserve more views, I think is kind of the question. And this is really shows my own lack of. I don't watch nearly as many of you guys as I wish that I did, because there's some really great channels out there and some good folks. But some people I do want to single out here. Some people that I enjoy what they do, and they usually interact with me, and that's cool. So some folks that if maybe have similar taste as I do, so would recommend checking them out. Jolly Roger is really great, great channel. The Vinylverse, I fell into the Vinylverse through a Michael Nesmith thing, I think, and really great stuff. So the Vinylverse, a relatively new channel, but I found this through this shout out in the Vinyl Tag, which is really cool, which I'm assuming that's what this is for. Black Beans and Rice. Relatively new, really good channel, good guy, good stuff. Cheap and Cheerful Record Collector, another one, good stuff, always stuff to see and do. And another one, My Friend Morrissey is the channel. Really, really neat stuff on there. Good guy, good selection of discussion and whatnot. And finally, last certainly not least, Jamie Cottle, Canadian guy, great channel. Again, I feel like these guys should have way more views. I don't know the secret to how to get people to view more or subscribe. If I did, you know, so be it, but I don't. And so those are guys that that definitely go check out their channels and subscribe to them and all that good stuff. And inevitably I leave people out. There's a lot of channels that I watch, and a lot of channels I don't watch nearly enough of. But there's people that are out there floating around in the VC that have really good stuff, and I enjoy their content. And so those specific ones are just ones that I was shouting out. The next question, holes looking to fill your collection. when I talk about holes to fill my collection, you know, it's funny. Last year I did this thing where I kind of set out to do XTC and Thin Lizzy. And fortunately, I've done really, really well on both fronts. I've really filled those collections out, and I've picked up a lot of XTC and a lot of Thin Lizzy, which it seems to be really hard to find out in the wild these days, and love those records. You know, I'm going to really, I threatened to do this last year, and I think I may do it this year. Don't hold me to it. We'll see in a couple of months as we go forward. But Billy Hurst, who has a great channel, Billy Hurst and I were talking about this kind of off-site, off-channel, about the concept of, I've always been a quantity over quality kind of record buyer. And I realized that I've bought a lot of stuff, but a lot of it I won't say I don't, I've culled my record collection, so it's not like I have a lot of stuff I don't care for or I don't want. But I think what I'm going to do this year that's differently, and it's kind of stemming from what we talked about, instead of taking $40 or $50 and buying 20 records with it, I may take that and buy a couple of really good records that I need or want, and this kind of ties into the holes to looking to fill in my collection. If you looked at my recent room tour video, I showed my jazz collection. It's really, really bad. I don't buy a lot of jazz. I don't look at a lot of jazz, even though I love jazz. My wife just the other day says, why don't you have more jazz? And I thought, you know, it's a really good question. It's not because I dislike the music. It's just that I don't ever really look because I'm always flipping through the same 70s and 80s pop rock albums. And so this year I kind of want to make an idea to buy less stuff and really kind of fill in holes. And so when I'm thinking about holes in my collection, I start thinking about, in particular, solo Beatles, John Lennon in particular, that I need a few John Lennon albums that I don't have. And so I might work on filling those in, and work on getting my John Lennon collection up to snuff, as well as George Harrison. I'm missing some key George Harrison albums. And not that they're really rare or anything, I just don't have them, or when I do see them, they're either too much or I don't know. There's different factors. The Beach Boys. I really need some more Beach Boys stuff. I've got a few, but there's a lot more Beach Boys I need. So those are some holes I'm looking to fill. Beach Boys, solo Beatles in particular, and then more jazz music. I need more jazz. I've got some good jazz records, but I need some more of them. The next question is cheap album that's really good. You know, an album you can find for really cheap that's a really good album. All right, a cheap album that's really good. This is one that I kind of always have been seeing. This is Bruce Cockburn. This is Stealing Fire, which is a fantastic record. And I kept seeing it for a buck or two here and there. I'm assuming it's a cheap album. I don't know how common it is. I may be totally off my rocker. This may be a record that everybody wants that nobody can get their hands on. But in particular, this is one that I'm looking at possibly saying this is a cheap album that's really good. It was cheap for me, and it's a great record. Bruce is a fantastic songwriter. This is an album from the early 80s, and it holds up. I think you'll be astonished by how good it is. Favorite side project album is the next question. As a side project, it's really, really weird that there's so many good side projects, but favorite side project album, favorite side project, he's going to kill me for calling it a side project, but, you know, it's Jack White, The Raconteurs. This is a great rock album. Jack White teaming up with Brendan Benson. And Brendan Benson, I don't know if you're familiar with Brendan Benson, but he's a great pop rock songwriter. I think he balances out where if you think of Jack White as sort of the White Stripes, garage rock, edgy, blues-based kind of stuff, this is definitely more steeped in sort of just slick rock and roll kind of sounds. And when I say slick, it's definitely more polished sounding than Jack stuff. Jack stuff outside of this. I mean, Jack is involved in a few bands, Raconteurs, Dead Weather, and I think he'd probably be offended for me calling it a side project. And it's really not. It's a full-fledged band. They have a new album coming out this year. Looking forward to that. But when it did come out, it was seen as a side project, which he took offense to, and I get why. But so I may be cheating by singling out, because the Raconteurs, a lot of people prefer Raconteurs to the White Stripes or anything else Jack White has done. This is the favorite thing. This is their favorite thing he's involved in. But it's a great record, and it's worthy of all the praise. The Raconteurs, Consolers of the Lonely, which is their second album. So there you go. So I felt like I cheated you guys on side project and artist with the Raconteurs, and how unfair it is. So I'm gonna do a twofer on that. I'm gonna go with Sonic Sunspot, the Dukes of the Stratosphere, which is a side project from the guys in XTC. Kind of a throwback thing. They explored it further with later releases like Oranges and Lemons, but this is when they kind of went for the psych pop thing in the 80s. So it was a very different sort of thing, but it's definitely what I would call a side project. It was sort of XTC working as a different name, so it became associated as a side project. The Dukes of the Stratosphere for side project. A song from an artist or a band that is uncharacteristic, you know, to find a song that fits. I mean, when you think about a band and what they do, it's a good question. An uncharacteristic album or song. This took me a little bit of thinking, because I mean, there's a lot of great bands that have gone out on a limb and done some different stuff. But you know, I'm going to talk about Michael Nesmith. I think if you were following Nesmith's career from the Monkees into those early country rock records he made with the First National Band, and then you kind of were following all the way up through. And the hits just keep on coming, which was just him and Red Roads on pedal steel, then The Prison definitely comes across as really left field. I don't know if there was such a thing as new age music back then. This was 73, 74 when it came out. And it was a high concept thing, because not only musically it was uncharacteristic, but there was a book with a soundtrack. It was packaged as such in this sort of thick box. And so this release was probably, if you were a fan and following along and heard this, you probably were thinking, what in the heck? And the idea was that you listen to the record and read the book. The book's kind of a little allegorical tale. But musically, it definitely gets away from that sort of country rock sort of thing that he had been doing up to that point. And so it definitely was a left field thing. Now, since then, he's done some even more out there stuff than this. There's an album he did a few years ago called Raise, which is really, really nutty. So he's definitely never been one to leave you in the same place to be a country rock pioneer. This album was certainly a left turn by all means. So I'm going with The Prison by Michael Nesmith. The last album I purchased happens to be... so I checked Discogs for the last album that I purchased, and these were recent sort of Christmas present type things. Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit live at the Ryman. I took the sleeve out, so it probably looks weird. It looks black. It's a die cut thing. You can see the little windows there. It's supposed to shine through there, but it's a double live album from the Ryman from Jason Isbell, and in that same shipment, the new Red Rose Speedway from Paul McCartney and Wings, the 2-disc version, kind of reimagined. This is awesome. Red Rose is an underrated album, I think, because it only had just kind of one hit, My Love. But I love this double set. It's I wouldn't say it's like a revelation, but it's good. So those were the last two albums that I purchased. Boy, great albums with a bad cover. Wow, I had to do a lot of thinking about this one, but a bad cover with a great album inside of it. So a great album with a bad cover, and I'm doing the whole White Album joke. And yeah, I mean, you might argue Beggar's Banquet, this isn't the real cover, the toilet cover, which is far superior. It's a great album. There's no two ways about it, but this cover leaves little to be desired. And to me, I mean, considering this came out around the same time as the White Album and the Stones were kind of still living in the shadow of the Beatles, it just doesn't do anything for me cover-wise. It's just, I get it. It's an invitation to the Beggar's Banquet. So, you know, as a concept, but I mean, artistically speaking, it just doesn't light my fire. A bad album with a good cover. Now that's an interesting concept, because you think about, boy, that album is really terrible, but the cover is fantastic. A bad album with a good cover. I don't know if this is a good cover. I think the cover is better than the album. Bob Dylan's Knocked Out Loaded. This was the first thing that I thought of when I saw the category, and there's probably a lot of other things. I have a ton of terrible album covers, but they're usually terrible albums, and I have an affinity towards that. This is actually so bad that my copy is still sealed. I've not even opened it. So I've only got it as a Dylan completist, but I've not felt the need to listen to it now. There, you know, Brownsville Girl's a decent song, but as an album, it's a horrible album. But I kind of dig the cover and the title, Knocked Out Loaded. It's kind of cool. But it's you know, if you're into the mystique of Bob Dylan, this is probably not a great place to start. 4 records, 2 records, 2 records, 4 records, 4 records, 2 records, 2 records, 4 records. So blues album. You know, being from Mississippi, I know a lot about the blues. Not that being from Mississippi makes me a more or less of an expert on the blues. I mean, you know, just you know, it's a thing. I grew up steeped in blues music, and so there's a lot of blues artists that are from a lot of the areas where I grew up and lived and have explored. But just to show a blues album, I always go to Junior Kimbrough and the Soul Blues Boys all night long. And the reason I say that, and I've told the story here before on this channel in another video, but when I first listened to this album, it was at a listening station at a music store. I think it was a Borders Books. And I put on the headphones and was listening to this music and kind of closed my eyes. And I noticed that when I opened my eyes again, I was not physically in the same location that I was when I started listening to it. I don't know how it happened. I didn't realize that I was moving. I just knew that there was movement going on. I wasn't dancing, but this music just is mesmerizingly good. And it's hill country blues, so it's not your typical sort of 12-bar Delta blues. So if you're into like B.B. King and even Muddy Waters and some of the Chicago acts, this stuff is more droning. It's definitely loose and a little more ragged, but just really, really primitive sounding, but such good blues music. Junior Kimbrough and the Soul Blues Boys all night long. Blues album. So the next question is an earworm song. And so you think about the songs, I guess, that get stuck in your ear. So when we were talking about earworms, there really one thing just popped into my brain and is stuck there like an earworm. Silly Love Songs by Paul McCartney. I got a lot of flack when I was younger for being so drawn to that song. I still think it's just irresistibly catchy. And I love the way it's simple in terms of just the whole concept and silly, but it works. I love the way he builds the melodies on top of each other, and then, you know, as he builds them, the verses and choruses or whatever they are, it's just melodically, just everything about it just kind of gets stuck in there, and it's a catchy song. It's an earworm. Historically important artists. You know, some the choices I've seen are really obvious choices, and there's some historically important artists and I've seen a few, and some are obvious and some are not so obvious. I'm going to go with one, Charlie Patton, a Mississippi blues singer. Charlie Patton is really, really wonderful. probably lives in the shadow of guys like Robert Johnson, another historically important artist. But so many guys have borrowed from Charlie Patton and done his songs. Bob Dylan is a big fan, among others. So I'm going to go with Charlie Patton as far as historically important artist. An album that I own because of my parents. Without my parents, I may not know this album. So an album that I own because of my parents, I probably talked about this before here in another video maybe, but I'm going to go with The Outlaws. This was an album my dad had, and I was just always drawn to it because I thought the cover was cool. But it had guys that my dad liked, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, of course Jesse Coulter, and Tom Paul Glaser. It's just, it's an album that just brings me to a place and a time. My dad had this record in his collection, and it's not that it's a brilliant album by any means. It's actually got some really weak stuff on it. It's got some really nice stuff on it as well. But this is an album that every time I see it, I just think of my dad's small, and my parents had a small record collection. It wasn't big at all. And my parents weren't necessarily musical people. I mean, they had a few sort of records here and there, but they weren't actively, buying records. So they were content with the radio. But this is an album I just remember, and I remember listening to as a kid and really enjoying. Best dollar bin find. Digging through the dollar bin, you never know what you're going to see or what you're going to find or what's out there. Best dollar bin find, I really think... this is a hard one because going back to what I was saying, quality over quantity, so on and so forth. But I will share this. This was a thrift store record, so it was $1, and a really, really wonderful record. Roger Nichols and the Small Circle of Friends. This album, late 60s, Sunshine Pop. Fantastically good stuff. This was in great shape. This is a stereo copy on A&M Records. Just a really, really great record in great shape. Found it for $1. Freaked out when I found it because it's a very rare record and not one that you see. So I wouldn't say it's a dollar bin record, but it's a thrift store find, and it costs $1. So I think it should count. Favorite double album. If there was a double album I could think of that's an absolute favorite. I know there's been a lot of joking. In all seriousness, this probably is my favorite double album. And listening to it again over the holidays, it's really fresh in my brain. But it's cliche, I know, and there's a lot of arguments that it should be a single. And there is stuff that I would cut from it. It's a whole different argument. But, it's a desert island disc for me. I really love the material on the White Album. And so it's an obvious, but it's an infamously famous double album. Should it be a double album? But one of my favorite bands and one of my favorite albums by that band. It's a double album. I'm going with the self-titled Beatles album, aka the White Album. An album I learned about from the VC. Had I not been in the VC, I would have not known this album, I'm thinking. Well, it's got the posters and everything. Album that I learned about from the VC. There's been a few things that people have pointed me to, like XTC and bands like that. Those are things that certainly come through, but the only thing that I kept coming back to was First Aid Kit, Stay Gold. Now, it's not, and I have to qualify, this really wasn't because it was found through the VC. My friend Rusty, one of my best friends, he sent this to me as a gift, and I love it. It's a great record, and he just sent it to me and said, this is an album you need. I guess this shows my weakness in the time that I spend watching other videos, and I don't spend enough of it. And there's so many great channels and so much great content. And so many of you point out some stuff, and there's some things that I'm looking for because of the VC, but I don't have them, so I can't really qualify it as an answer. Particularly the Link Ray album that Light in the Attic reissued, that's one that's on my radar as one to get. And so many of you, Tales from the Crate, Sean's Lock. Those you guys have those records and are big fans, but I don't have it. I don't have a copy of it, so I can't show it. So I'm just going to show this because this is an album that I probably would have never got if somebody had not just stuck it in my face and said here, which is unfortunate because it's a really, really nice album. 10-inch record. Show a 10-inch record. That's not even a 10-inch record. Show a 10-inch record. This is Sundazed, Another Dimension. This is outtakes, and it's a double 10-inch from the recordings of the Byrds doing Fifth Dimension, some of the stuff there. So it's a double 10-inch, so it almost as a double anyway. But yeah, this is a really, really cool release. And like I said, it's the whole idea is like it's an alternate Fifth Dimension. And you know, it's out, just a cool release. It's got a gatefold, 12 unheard tracks at the time. Of course, they've been heard now because I've played it. Another Dimension by the Byrds. A 7-inch record. And I don't do a lot of 7 inches in singles. And so I randomly grabbed one just to show something that's cool, and I didn't want to do just the third man stuff because I've got so much of that. This was a Record Store Day release, Grapefruit, and a lot of you know Grapefruit. It was a group associated with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and actually John and Paul produced the track on here, Lullaby. It's a speeded up mono mix, which is this particular one, and on side B is Sweet Little Miss No Name. This was recorded in London, 1968, as a single, but this came out a couple of years ago on RPM. I think Andrew Sandoval was involved. 2016 is the date on this, and so really, really cool group. I actually have their LP, but it's related to the Beatles. It's just good, good pop rock single. But Grapefruit. Lullaby, as produced by John and Paul, Apple Publishing. So this is related to Apple. And a lot of people know Grapefruit as the book that Yoko Ono did. So it's got a good Beatle connection. But it's a great single. It's a great 45. So I don't know how common it is or how out there it is, but it's a 7-inch and it's a good one. Favorite album to fall asleep? I don't fall asleep to music. It's usually dark and quiet. Shh. Wow, is Revolution Number 9 even a song? Favorite VC experience? You know, this, it's a good question. I've got to know so many people through the VC, and there's so many more out there to get to know. And I mean, a lot of times these vinyl tag videos are great because it's a good introduction. And so I would recommend for anybody that's thinking about getting in, do a vinyl tag. Those are really cool. And it really lets people know how you are. I say jump in and do it. There's so many different channels out there with so many different styles. And so you'll find what happens, and I don't know if this is fortunate or unfortunate, you build a little group of people that you kind of, like I said, there's people, I watch their videos all the time. And there's some people that I've got to know personally through the VC, which is what it's all about anyway. It's why it's called a community. But a couple of experiences that are really cool. Last year I did a whole channel of daily records, different record every day, and spotlighted a few folks. And so one of the experiences was Garland Frady, Pure Country. It's an album that came out in the early 70s on the Countryside label, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but Countryside was a subsidiary of Elektra. Jack Holzman was involved. But more specifically, Michael Nesmith. A lot of you know that I'm a Nesmith fan. This is an album that Nesmith produced and played on. Really, really cool. But the thing about it is that I think Garland Freight, there are a couple of relatives of Garland's, because he's largely been forgotten just because he kind of did this one album and then fell off the radar, and he's since passed on. And it's a good country album. But a couple of his relatives reached out to me via the channel, which I thought was really, really cool. I think a niece. It was really an interesting experience, because that music that was kind of, I feel like, largely forgotten was getting some exposure, which is kind of what Daily Records was all about. I mean, I did a lot of big name albums of big artists and stuff you see all the time, but stuff like that really made it cool. And another one along those lines is Zyder Z. I even mispronounced the band's name on the video. This was a reissue from Light in the Attic, which is a band out of Memphis. But a couple of people that know these guys reached out to me because I spotlighted the album, and I think that's just really cool. And so it just goes to show you never know who's watching the videos and who might pop up. And so if I have any advice, that's really the thing. Just do your thing. If you've got something in your collection that you're passionate about, share it with us, and you'll build an audience. I wish I could give you like some trick to getting subscribers and all that stuff. As I said earlier, with the shout outs, and those things are tricky, because inevitably with shout outs I always feel like I'm leaving somebody out. There's so many people, there's so many good people in the VC, so it becomes difficult to sort of start singling people out and go, well, this guy or that guy, and there's just a lot of cool folks. So just get out there and do it. Or if you're not comfortable with that, just lurk and comment. Do your thing. That's kind of what it's about as well. I mean, I think it serves a purpose, but it gives us a chance to sort of share in our passion of music and collecting music, which is a cool thing. So that's it, the Vinyl Tag 2019 complete. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I had fun doing it. These are always great questions, and I love getting involved with that. So I appreciate everyone that took time to watch all of it. Comment down below. Give me the old thumbs up, like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's always great to get new faces around here. I'm discovering a lot of new faces just through the Vinyl Tag, and that's awesome. So I appreciate everybody that takes time to interact. The Instagram and Twitter feeds are TommyBurton75. You can follow me over there, and I usually show when I'm spinning, so that's very cool. But thank you all for watching. I'll see you all again very soon, and good night.